Ryan, are you ready? This meeting to order. Would someone move item 1.02 to approve the agenda?
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion, changes, or additions? Mrs. Periyama, yes.
Mrs. Lyons. Mr. Crandall.
Yes.
Ms. Lyons.
Yes.
Miss, oh, I just lost everybody. Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore.
Yes.
Mrs. Pilardo.
Yes.
Mr. Cordone.
Yes.
This brings us to item 1.03, where we normally hold our public forum. In lieu of the public forum, we ask people to contact the board through our email, which is clerk@fulton.cnyric.org. And when you do that, the email goes to all board members simultaneously. And the process is in person or with emails. Questions are referred to the superintendent to deal with, as he has responsibility for the day-to-day operations of the district. Mr. Polvino, I didn't know if you had any comments you wanted to make with regard to anything today or not. I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
There you go.
All right.
Now I hear you.
Thank you. It's been a very challenging and emotional last 24 hours. I think a lot of angst for people last evening. I will speak to. I probably spoke to upwards between 7 and 10 families today, parents from a variety of different schools, and I appreciated those conversations, whether they were phone calls directly to us or to me, or emails. People have figured out that I don't email back. I'd rather pick up the phone and call. So I've had 2 30-40-minute conversations this afternoon in the last couple of hours, which have been really healthy. Good conversations. There's a lot of emotion that goes on, with the masks, and we really reflect in the rearview mirror. We've spent 20 months doing the best we can on behalf of all of our kids, and we've really tried to aim for the middle. When you think about 3,200 kids and you think about 1,800 families and 650 plus staff and the community together, there's a lot of individuals with a lot of points of view. And I think, we've done quite well throughout this. The decision last night from the judge in the Nassau County area with respect to the mask wearing was stayed this morning. We received guidance last night to keep the masks in place today while the state was working through things. And so, which is what we did. On top of that, this morning at 6:43, they did file an appeal. This afternoon, apparently there was a meeting at approximately 2 p.m. And then approximately, as I was on the phone actually speaking with a parent, the email started to pop in. And we received, the best summary is the appellate division issued a temporary stay of the Nassau County's court decision invalidating 10 NYCRR 260, which include a mask mandate for schools. There is a full hearing on the issue scheduled for this Friday. This means that for this week, at least, the mask mandate required by the New York State Department of Health regulation is still in effect through Friday. So it sounds like it's going to be a busy Friday night and into the weekend as we receive more guidance. I would ask that our families, are patient with us. We tried to address each student and family individually today. I'd like to say I thought our principals did a good job working through that. This was last minute, really, that this all came about. And I'm very proud of it. And I think our kids also did an outstanding job today. For the most part, it was relatively not an issue in our schools. However, as we've seen in recent weeks with guidance with respect to quarantining and and isolation and all of it. It seems like it changes on a weekly basis and daily basis in some cases. And in this instance, this came out just a week ago. There was an opposite decision made of what was made last night. So 2 different Supreme Court judges looking at it differently. So now it's in the hands of the appellate division and going through that process. So that would be my comment on that this evening. So, and as I said, any parents, reach out to us, talk with us. Obviously, we respect it. Learned a lot of things today, things that maybe we can try to build in and think about. So I think with every challenge comes a positive type of outcome, something. I had some very tremendous positive conversations today, even though they were difficult conversations. They were positive conversations, and I feel like I'm looking forward to working with each of those families now and in the future. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mrs. Griffin.
Thank you. This takes us to item 1.04, approve the regular meeting minutes from January 11th. Would someone move it?
Move it. Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Periyama, yes.
Ms. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
Mrs. Alvagore,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
and Mr. Cordone.
Yes.
Item 1.05, approve minutes from the January 18th special meeting. Budget
Move it.
workshop.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Periyama, yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville,
Yes.
Mrs. Alvagore,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
and Mr. Cordone.
Yes.
Are there any questions with regarding to upcoming meetings under the president's report? All right, and then we have one other item, and that is I was instructed to come back this evening to complete our conversation about how we will meet going forward. Are we going to meet virtually, or are we going to resume meeting in person? There were some questions asked, and late today, you were provided with some data. I hope you had a chance to see it. Mrs. Perry emailed it over with numbers. That was one of the questions one of our colleagues had about the number of people that attended meetings virtually and in person, and the numbers of people that reached out.
Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
Any thoughts on that information or anything else? I hope every question was answered.
Well, I'm ready to stay where we are.
Mr. Crandall.
I'd like to do at least one more meeting virtual.
One
'Cause
more.
I think the numbers are going to really start dropping off. So I'm good with it. Maybe the next first meeting of February being virtual. After that, we'll see what happens.
Okay. Mrs. Abelgore.
I'm fine with the virtual meetings. We, like Mr. Crandall said, as we go along, we can see how it's working. Just how does that work exactly? If we were to stay virtual and then we wanted to switch to in-person, how is that looking for us? How would that look for us? Like you said last meeting, we can't just switch a switch just because we don't have enough people for a forum. So we would just give the 2 weeks if we decided that we wanted to go back in person? If we chose to stay virtual tonight?
So where we had an issue, Brenda, was once we advertise the meeting, whether it's virtual or in person, that's how we're going. So if for some reason we didn't have enough people to attend an in-person meeting because of health reasons or whatever, there's a lot of different reasons, not just health. We couldn't just switch to, that was the question. Could we switch to virtual? And you can't do that. We have to re-advertise to be virtual. So we would start over again. We'd have to, as a board, look for another date to make up that meeting. So I think that's what you're referring to, was that part of the conversation.
I just wanted to know also if we decide that we want to stay virtual right now as we're watching for the numbers to come down a little bit more. Say in February or early March, we decide to go back in person. We just can make that decision and go back in person?
I believe so. I'll ask Mr. Superintendent Polvino for his advisement here, but I believe that's true.
Okay. Okay.
I can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No,
I
Brian.
never turned my microphone off. Normally, I was rustling papers here. You were correct. Once we announced, so the 5-day advance notice, the posting in the news and on the website and all of that, outside of that time, the board can make that decision as to whether they're going to be in person. We'd also talked about continuing the live streaming aspect of that as well. So that's a discussion as well, but that's an opportunity we have.
Which brings me to another question that was asked about live streaming. No, wait a minute. Not live streaming. So having meetings where we are partially virtual and in person, a combination, because that can happen. I just want to let you know, and I'm going to ask Superintendent Polvino to speak to this because we haven't done it in this district, but there's some concerns about our ability to do it well. So I'm going to let you speak to that, Brian.
Yeah, we're looking at the technology, and obviously technology has changed, but it does lend itself. There is some technology such as what they call an OWL that we utilize, for example, in some of our special education meetings, which has a committee that's sitting perhaps at the site. And let's say a parent or an advocate can't make the meeting there present, but we can actually put them in. So the OWL can scan the room, and then also there can be a Google Meet. The question that's really that comes about, and I would ask Dr. Lisi to chime in, is that technology doesn't always work as easily as it should, and you may get feedback or other kinds of things where it may be difficult for the public to be able to hear clearly or see clearly what's going on. Dr. Lisi, is that an accurate assessment or conclusion?
Yeah, that sums it up. We're going to test beforehand. It really just means one extra connection, which the more you add a connection, the more likely you have a failure point. But we'll test beforehand, and we think that we can facilitate if the need arises.
Would that be like if I was down here and wanted to be in the meeting?
Correct.
Thank you.
And as long as you're announcing where you're located per the law, then that can happen.
Okay.
Well, and the other thing was if someone were local but unable to attend because they were in some sort of it could be quarantine, or it could just be they weren't feeling well and didn't feel they should come into a public meeting. Mm-hmm. Trying to figure out what the numbers could look like.
That's right.
And again, if somebody's quarantined, I don't think that we can't use that because you're obligated under the format where it's virtual and in person. Like you, Lynn, it has to be it would have to be advertised where you're at, where your location is.
A week ahead of time, correct?
Yes. So I don't think that that's going to work. If anybody thought that was a possibility, I don't see that happening going forward. So if we had a number of people that weren't feeling well, we might have to cancel and reschedule a meeting.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns I had. If, say, not even if we weren't feeling good, but we were taking care of family members who weren't feeling well. Mm-hmm. Now you're just saying that we wouldn't be able to jump on virtually while you guys are in person. That could make a difference.
Right. I don't think we could. I don't believe we can, Brenda, because you have to advertise in advance your location, and it has to be accessible to the public. So handicap accessible. And obviously, if you're with someone or yourself, you're not feeling well, you're not going to want anyone in. That would be the purpose for not attending in person. So that is not going to work. What we're doing right now is different in that right now we are subscribing to meeting virtually because of the special order by the government, which is a whole different process than the one that's typically used. And BOCES has been using it. I know Mr. Cordone could probably speak to it, where they have board members that travel from time to time, and they will log in from wherever they're at and join the meeting. But we can't do that if you're sick and you're in quarantine. You couldn't do that. Is everybody clear on that point? I want to make sure we cover all the concerns. David, did I get that right?
You did, yes.
And how does that work? Since you have experience, how is that working for you out there at City?
So the board members that participate virtually, they do so. And I'm not really sure the technology behind it. Mr. Lisi may know that.
Excuse me.
If there's another, it works seamlessly. We only had one meeting where the participating board members there wasn't sound, but I think they resolved that. So, but overall, I think many of our meetings this year have had at least one or more member that, for whatever the reason, have had to participate virtually.
Okay. Are all the questions answered now? I want to make sure everyone's question was answered. All right. So, let's see, Jessica, I think you're next. Brenda, are you still virtual? You said virtual is your preference and you want to go like meeting to meeting. Was that what you were saying? And Tim wants to go at least one more meeting. Okay, Jessica.
In person.
Okay. And Mr. Cordone.
I am good with whatever the majority wants. I know that our meetings in person, have a different feel to them, but I want to be respectful to the needs of everyone. So I'm good with whatever the majority would like.
Okay. I know I'm missing someone here. Jennifer.
I feel like we've always prided ourselves as a district to which our colleagues look up to us being innovative in our approaches. And I personally think that our technology department, we can handle it. And I would like to be in person, but I do respect the others and them wanting to be virtual still. But if I were to have to vote, I would say in person.
Okay. Now my sense is where there's not, yeah. I mean, I would like virtual, I think, for at least one more meeting anyways. I would like to do that. And let's sort out the plan and give them time to figure out our technology.
Would it make more sense to do it for the meetings of February, so it's a complete month?
That would work for me because I know I have two board members that are going to be out of town. And so again, I'm trying to think about having a quorum for attendance. And right now under this format, it's easier to get a quorum. I'm concerned about changing the format to the mixed as to whether or not we can achieve a quorum. Lynn, I think you're saying something, but I don't know if you're intending for us to hear you or not.
I agree with Dave. I think we ought to put it out to the end of February and go from there and see how our counts are. I also think that being in person is the better way to be.
Yeah.
But at this point, I want everybody healthy. I want us to be able to do board work. And if we have people that can't show up, we can't. And you got to postpone. And the way things have been going lately, we have a lot of board work. I mean, there's meeting after meeting here, so, and we got the budget going on too. That's just my opinion.
So we could go February, and I'm not sure when the cutoff date is. We need to find out what there is a cutoff date when this is going to end. So let's say for the month of February, unless things change from the state directive. So I want to be clear on that. If the state says otherwise, we're back in person no matter what. Does that sound good? And then we'll work out give Mr. Lisi and his tech team time to work through setting us up so that if some of our members want to attend virtually, they can do that, and we can have productive meetings. All right, so we're all good. I'm kind of looking. I thank you for the conversation, and I'm going to turn this meeting over to the superintendent.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Once again, I just wanted to, I should have said when I was speaking before, we will be sending a communication to families and students and staff this evening. Probably maybe it's already gone out. I know it was being prepared with respect to the masks and right now the stay order that's in place. First thing this evening is actually we've gone through recognitions at every board meeting since really late October. And this evening, we want to recognize our administrators. We went back through and last but not least is our administrators. And I want to thank them for their tireless efforts on behalf of our students, working closely with all of our families and the community, their leadership, their communication, and their sharing of all the work that's going on in the schools. I mean, one of our things we're really trying to do is share our stories in our schools. There is some great efforts going on, and sharing what's going on with respect to the additional funding coming into schools and the opportunities and the supports. Had some great conversations with principals and families actually recently, and the excitement about the different opportunities that we're building in all of our schools and providing all of the resources. So a lot of great things going on. We're ensuring that we're striving to support the needs of every student every day, and I see that with our team on a daily basis. We're really trying to reach out, and we've had so many kids with so many different experiences throughout the last 20 months. And what we're trying to do is, and you can see it starting to come together. We're starting to see some of the data, those mid-year data points are starting to come out. So we're starting to see some of the fruits of the labor of our administrators and all of the teachers and staff that they're leading and the hard work that the kids are putting in each and every day. And then finally, I want to thank all of our administrators for their dedication, leadership, and boundless energy. This has been a time when it's been energy draining, and some of the most recent conversations, are right there. They're just full of energy, full of ideas, and pressing and on trying to come up with the best solutions for kids in innovative ways. So I'm very proud of this leadership team and all of the staff and our faculty and staff in our district. And tonight was the time to recognize our administrators. So I wanted to do that. So thank you to all of our administrators. You'll hear from a couple this evening in the next presentation. And you're starting to hear from different parts of our organization, different departments. And so is there any discussion or thoughts? If not, we'll move into the second section. So thank you to our administrators this evening. Practice my wait time. All right. Strategic Coherence Plan. Throughout the course, at least since late October, and for the last couple of years, the Strategic Coherence Plan has been at the center of all of our work and has been the center line. And if you told me a couple of years ago that it would lead us through a time of great change and great and times of the unknown, we're not sure what was going to be coming at us next, our Strategic Coherence Plan has actually helped us navigate through that. It's been a great rudder. And that I think is testament to a pretty good plan. And what we've done this year and last year is we're tying our Strategic Coherence Plan to our budget and budget presentations. So this evening, we're going to be talking about the social, emotional, developmental health aspect of our Strategic Coherence Plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Geithner and Liz Tiffany, who are going to lead that. And they've got some friends with them this evening that are also going to help with that presentation. So Ms. Geithner and Ms. Tiffany.
Thank you and good evening. Liz, would you like me to share?
the slide presentation?
Sure, if you don't mind.
Okay,
Thanks.
I don't mind.
And if you can introduce yourselves, I failed to do so. I should have put your titles with who you are. So let everybody know who you are and what you're doing. Thank you.
Yep. So I'm going to start with turning it over to Liz Tiffany to introduce her team. Liz is our Director of Student Support Services, and she is primarily responsible for the implementation of this section of our Strategic Coherence Plan on social, emotional, developmental health. So Liz, can you please introduce our Restorative Practice Specialists?
Absolutely, my pleasure. We don't have our full team with us tonight, but we do have representatives from our restorative specialist team. And we have Desiree Saladin from Fairgrave and Kelly Sluka, who is at Volney. And again, you'll hear a little bit more from me about an overview. And then at the end of our presentation, really some celebrations and the great work that they're doing in their buildings.
Thank you, Liz. So I'm going to begin with kind of the nuts and bolts of the Strategic Coherence Plan, which takes us always back to our mission and our vision. And in the social, emotional, developmental health portion of our plan, you can really see how we are trying to bring this vision to life about hope and resilience, and ensuring that our schools become a place where our students, our families, and our staff feel like this is really the center of our community and we can all come together. And as always, all of the things that we are implementing in our district strive to achieve coherence. So we want to focus on what the future direction of our district is. What do our students, staff, and families need in the way of social, emotional, developmental health and support? How do we work together, not just with our students, families, and staff, but also with community partners to develop a collaborative culture? How do we get better at the effective best practices that are out there and really deepen our learning around what will work most effectively to support our students? And then how do we know what we do and what we invest in is working to achieve the goals that we want for our students? So tonight, in this 6-part strategic coherence plan, we've heard about leadership, literacy, instruction, and innovation, and we'll focus on social, emotional, developmental health this evening. So the strategic intent around this focus area is based on the measurement of the student voice survey that we've been administering, and in particular around one question: I feel welcomed and part of my school. So our objective by 2024 is to ensure that 90% of our students, when they answer this survey question, can say that they agree or strongly agree that they feel welcomed and part of their school community. The action steps within our plan, you can see, really focus on our social emotional learning curriculum and developing our staff capacity around that, and making sure that our staff is well equipped at providing supports that result in positive school culture and incorporate trauma sensitive and restorative practices. So those are really the action steps that we have embraced within this plan, and they include making sure that our families and community really have a good understanding of these initiatives and efforts within the school and how they impact school, but also home and in our community.
Gary, could I ask you, could you give an example, one example of each when you say trauma sensitive and what was it, culture?
Restorative?
Yes, just give an example of each so that we're all clear, talking about the same thing. I want to make sure.
Okay, sure. So the trauma sensitive practices, it's been something that we have been learning about as a staff over the last several years. And it's really based in the brain science of how the brain and the body respond to chronic and acute stressors, and how we as a school community can build in specific supports around students to kind of mitigate the impact of chronic and acute stress that they might be experiencing for any variety of reasons, and how that again impacts the body and the brain. So that's trauma sensitive practices. Restorative practices are really, and Liz and her RPS specialist will talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation, but that's really about two things: building community, a sense of community among our stakeholders, and also developing processes. So if harm is done to relationships for any reason, in any way, that there is a mechanism by which we can restore and repair those damaged relationships and make our community whole again.
Jerry, are we, in terms of the surveys and the BIMAS 2 screener, are we communicating with parents when those are being administered?
Yes.
In advance? So in mass, is it, at what point are we communicating?
So we communicate at the beginning of the survey cycle. So the families also get the survey at the same time. So there's a survey that just went out at 15 weeks that families and students both got. And that survey window is still open right now. For the BIMAS, we just entered the administration window, and that's ongoing right now, and parents are notified that that's happening. So for our elementary age students, teachers complete those ratings on students, and for our secondary students, students do a self-report.
And how are they receiving that notification via email?
Ms. Tiffany, I'll let you answer that question.
Yep, that was in the beginning of the year. I can find the exact date for you, but that is sent out through district messaging. I'd have to look back if it was through, I believe it was email as well as a Facebook message or on our website. I know email was one of those modes of communication.
I'm just wondering if I'm familiar with BIMAS 2. So the administration occurs 3 times in a school year, and we're approaching the mid-year.
Yes.
Is a notification sent to parents only once at the beginning or at each screening?
At this point, it's just once in the beginning of the year, outlining our screening process that is, you're accurate, 3 times a year.
Okay.
If there are issues of concern that arise in the BIMAS, though, parents are notified individually of those issues of concern.
Yeah. I'm just wondering for parents to know, because as one, I missed that. I only know it professionally, but so I think it's helpful for parents to know. And I'm not really sure if when's the best time. We know that there's never a perfect time for communication, but there's a lot that we communicate the beginning of the year. So I'm just wondering if I don't know if we have a policy for that or just a protocol, administrative protocol, but just some thoughts around that. Yep.
Thank you for that. So to this point, really measuring our progress for this particular focus area in the strategic coherence plan, we do use that survey, the student voice survey and the family survey. We use the BIMAS 2, which is the behavior intervention monitoring assessment system. And we use our attendance and behavior data. So attendance is around, our benchmark goal of students will be in school more than 90% of the time. And our behavior data is based on office discipline referrals. So a little bit about how we are utilizing the resources from the COVID stimulus in this particular strategic coherence plan area. 21% of our allocated funds have been dedicated towards social, emotional, developmental health. And they support, among other things, 5 restorative practices specialists. So those are positions that were added. And you're going to hear from Kelly and Desiree shortly, and they'll tell you a little bit more about what exactly they do. We have 1 Sel Success Coach assigned to our high school, a 6th grade counselor to help implement our school counseling plan. We have contracted with Peaceful Schools to provide social emotional learning interventionists who provide tier 2 supports. And we focus these funds also on professional development around social emotional learning. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Liz and her team, because she's going to go into some more detail about specifically what these resources are being used for and some of the impact we have seen in our classrooms.
Great. Thank you so much, Jerry. And good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be here tonight to join you and share some of the new and enhanced initiatives that we have that pertain to our students' social emotional skills and their overall wellness. As Jerry mentioned, tonight I'll be providing a brief overview of each of those 4 positions that she just outlined on that budget slide. But please know that both Jerry and myself are always available should you want any more extensive information on any of these roles. So the first support that I'd like to highlight tonight is the Restorative Practices Specialist. And these specialists work in a variety of ways, often very creative ways, to foster a sense of community, prevent that harmful behavior and conflict, and restore positive relationships. So it's about building up the relationships and then restoring them if they have been harmed in any way. So throughout the day, specialists do things like facilitate classroom circles, hold restorative conferences and family meetings. And our team members tonight will explain a little bit more about that at the end of the presentation. In addition to the direct student contact, they also are doing a great job of building capacity by modeling and coaching, providing training for how to address behavior through a restorative lens. So that focus is always on repairing relationships and learning from behavior. So we're really trying to build up and coach up everyone in the building to follow that same model. We currently have an RPS at each elementary school. We're transitioning right now between personnel for our junior high role, but we do have five roles altogether. And the team comes together, they collaborate on a weekly basis and really hone their skill set, and also ensure that supports are consistent across the district. And I also just want to note that on each slide this evening, you'll see how this work supports our strategic coherence plan. So in this case, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold, so pardon me tonight. You'll see that our RPS team is utilizing data to provide those timely and targeted supports. So our student support team meets and they would say, there are certain students who really need those restorative specialist supports and services. So we are utilizing data in that way. And our team is also helping to develop resources for staff members and faculty in how to apply trauma-sensitive and restorative practices. All right, next, I'm really excited to share a little bit about our Sel Success Coach. So Tammy Sheldon serves in this role and she supports our high school students and staff. And her role is really designed to increase capacity and systems at the high school as they pertain to social emotional learning. So specifically, she spends a lot of time assessing the needs of the building, really our student needs, our staff needs, and how to instruct social emotionally, and then subsequently builds, plans, delivers weekly professional development for teachers and social emotional learning instruction for our students based on those needs. And you may remember that our pre-K through 8th grade students learn and practice social emotional skills through the Second Step curriculum. And currently Second Step does not have a high school component. And we really want to make sure that GRB students are receiving rich SEL instruction. And Tammy is doing a fantastic job of leading that charge. And I want to highlight that when we designed her role, something that we didn't necessarily outline, but she's really doing such an exceptional job with, is bringing in that student voice. Excuse me. She is meeting with students through forums and developing surveys, and she's part of our leading our student advisory, and just finding a lot of ways to make sure that students' interests and needs are there and they're alive and a part of this so that the SEL instruction is relevant and meaningful. You can go ahead, Jerry. Oh, sorry. Okay. I am pleased to share that we have a new partnership. So some of you may have heard about a new contract, a new partnership that we have with a local organization called Peaceful Schools. And we have contracted with them for the SEL interventionist role. And the SEL interventionists are really building up our research-based interventions, especially at the tier 2 level. So that means our students who need some extra support. Really, I guess I can explain it best by thinking of our math and reading interventionists. So if we have students who are not meeting those expected outcomes or those benchmarks in math or reading, we might assign them with a math or reading interventionist, maybe small group support, a research-based intervention. And that's the same thing that we're doing here with social and emotional learning. So students who may need that added layer of support for things like self-regulation, identifying and managing emotions, developing those coping strategies or problem solving or social skills. Our SEL interventionists are working with them typically in small groups, and they have targeted goals. They use different curricular resources, progress monitor. Again, anything that you would do kind of academically, it looks very similar in the social emotional lens. And we have just been beyond pleased with our partnership. And in fact, just a couple hours ago, I received a phone call asking to share some of this information about this partnership at a county meeting, because I've heard that some other districts in Oswego County would like to explore a partnership with them as well after hearing about some of the great work. So good things are getting out. Okay. And the last position that I'd like to talk about tonight is our new 6th grade counselor. And the initial reason that we proposed the 6th grade counselor for this year is that as part of the requirements set by the state for each district's comprehensive counseling plan, students in grades 6 through 12 really must be supported by a certified school counselor for college and career exploration instruction. And as you know, we have counselors, grade level counselors for our students in grades 7 through 12, but until this year, we didn't have a 6th grade counselor. And now Laura Bliss serves in this capacity and spends time in all 4 elementary schools. And she really goes above and beyond simply facilitating the completion of those 6th grade students' college and career portfolios, which is very time consuming and a very important task. But it is larger than that. She spends a lot of time in classrooms. She's teaching about goal setting. She's really becoming part of that 6th grade team, exposing students to a variety of college and career pathways. And in addition to the work directly with students, she's also working on family and community outreach and education as it pertains to graduation pathways and opportunities. So a lot of this information is new. A lot of this information is changing frequently. And we found that it was really important. You know, it's hard enough for us to keep track of these changes. We are certain that some of our families and communities probably are not keeping up with it either. So we wanted to make sure that we had an avenue, we had someone who could start developing some plans for that outreach and education. You know, right now she's currently working on a career fair, kind of breaking the traditional mold of our career fair and heavily involving the community businesses and families as well. All right, and the last new initiative that I'd like to talk about tonight is not a new role, not a new position, but it is a new team. And I am so sad tonight that Reagan and Molly were not able to make it, because they're actually both members of this school culture student advisory. They did both let me know that they're very eager to share more. So I do hope that in the future we have the opportunity to hear directly from them. But this team is comprised of 2 representatives from each grade, grades 7 through 12, as well as 2 6th grade reps per elementary building. So we have about 20 students altogether, and really they represent a lot of diversity, diverse learning needs, different native languages, races, gender identity, socioeconomic status, really just the overall student experience. It was really important to us that we had different experience and different views coming in, and that their voices were all equally heard. And the purpose of the group is to advise on how to make our schools more welcoming, and more inclusive. And the question that we always go back to is, how do we ensure that every single student in Fulton City School District is feeling welcomed and part of their school? So again, I am hoping that Molly and Reagan can speak to their work at a future meeting, because it's pretty powerful. It's certainly a group of leaders. They're coming up with some great ideas, and we just started meeting a couple months ago. So a lot of work ahead of us, but it's an inspiring group for sure. All right. So we have so much to celebrate. I do wish I could be on here all night just kind of celebrating and bragging about all of the wonderful work that teams are doing. But I do want to make sure that our two guests have some time to share their work. So Desiree, do you want to start by sharing a little bit about what's been going on over at Fairgrave?
Yes, thank you so much for having me tonight. It's been really wonderful implementing this program and having such great access with the students using this restorative lens. So a little bit about what we do really on our Tier 1 proactive side. All of that work is mostly completed during ongoing community circles in classrooms. And so during these circles, we are really clear about communicating the purpose and outcomes of the SEL work that we're doing, making sure that students understand. We're using relatable, developmentally appropriate language and methods for, students in grades kindergarten, and in my case, all the way through grade 6. So those circles can look very different in each grade, but making sure that students really understand the goals of the circles. They also really help students to really stop and think about their own thoughts, their feelings, their ideas about things, and then give them the opportunity to build and feel more confident sharing them with others in their classroom and school communities. There's a really strong focus on understanding the value of listening to others, and that really helps foster much stronger relationships and helping students to work together. Another benefit of the circles is that it allows us to really observe students' levels of mastery with the SEL competencies, which we then use in combination with the BIMIS data to inform decisions about students who may need further targeted support, such as small skill groups and things like that. We work really collaboratively with the Peaceful Schools staff, in that kind of area. And then last, we collectively, as a Restorative Practices team, we work to provide ongoing professional development. Over the past few months, we've really targeted the paraprofessionals in our buildings and have provided a few sessions on things such as self-awareness, communication, the trauma sensitivity that was mentioned earlier. So a few of the photos just give you a little glimpse of what the circles look like in classrooms. We really do set up in a circle. It's really important for that relationship building. We use a lot of different methods to make the information and the content relevant. We use a talking piece, so really we value, the expectations of the circle so that everyone feels that their voice is heard, and again, developing that importance and understanding of listening to other people. So the students have really taken to it. When I finish the circle, when are you coming back again? When's our next circle? Can we talk about this next time? They're really eager to engage, and the information that they're willing to share and talk about with each other has just been phenomenal. So it's been going really well.
Thank you so much, Desiree. The work is outstanding. To any of the board members, if you have the opportunity to be in buildings and see it in action, it's pretty powerful. And just be prepared. We will ask you to join circles if you see them. We don't like outside observers. We welcome you as part of the family. So just be ready. And Kelly, I know that you wanted to speak a little more to, Desiree talked about those classroom supports. You do that, and also want to speak to some of those Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports.
Yeah, I wanted to share a little bit about how we take that Tier 1 information and then we build more individualized support. For the prior 3 years, I was the school home liaison, so this I'm really, really excited about this role and all of the opportunities it's provided. I really feel like all of the things that I tried to do as a school home liaison, we're able to do with better fidelity, having this role in the building to support the school home liaison. it was always one of my goals as the school home liaison to know all of the kids in the building, and being in the classroom and doing circles with all of our students has really given all of our students more of a voice. And in giving them a voice, it's really helped us to identify trends and identify students who otherwise might not have shown up for as having social emotional needs. I feel like prior to this position, we were really basing our tier 2 groups on discipline data, attendance data, and now we're really basing them more on trends and student voice and what students are saying that they need. So an example of that, in our building, our 6th graders, we're talking a lot about worry, anxiety. So we started a tier 2 group called the Zen Kids Club. It was a voluntary group. I think we have about 45 kids in our 6th grade. And we have 9 kids who volunteered to join this group because they self-identified as students who would really benefit from building these skills. So our kids are really empowered and able to advocate for themselves. They see that in a circle that their voice matters, and they see the way that they're able to build relationships and repair harm. So they're more motivated to do it. In addition to that, because they see the way that circles work, they actively seek out support when they are having peer conflict. The amount of kids that I have come to my office and share that they're having trouble with a peer and they would really like to sit down and have a restorative conference to resolve that conflict has been amazing this year. Another thing that we're able to do is we're able to respond to, we'll work with administration to respond to discipline or to referrals in real time. So if a student is receiving a referral for any sort of classroom disruption, we can, in the same day, we can go and we can help and we can do reteaching. If there is peer conflict, we go and we can mediate that the same day. So rather than there being just consequences for these behaviors, the focus is more on learning rather than just consequences. I think that's a big, I think that just the access that students have to getting more social emotional support and advocating for themselves and their needs because their voices are more heard is really what's helping to drive our tier 2 support this year.
Can you speak to how you are able to separate yourself from that consequence portion or response to disciplinary situations? I mean, in terms of punitive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm involved in any sort of referral, I always lead with the fact that I'm here to help. I'm not here as a consequence. I'm here because I saw that something happened and I'd like to help repair what happened. We always start by asking for their perspective and helping and using guiding questions to dig deeper to really help them understand their role in the situation, help them understand how their actions might have harmed somebody else, and then really support them and understand and in developing how they can repair that harm. Consequences never come from a restorative practice specialist. That's why I said we work with administration.
Thank you, Kelly and Desiree. I really, again, there's so much depth to this, and I do hope at a future meeting or maybe a retreat, we could have you experience this a bit more, board members, and really expand the knowledge. It's pretty cool stuff. And as both Kelly and Desiree mentioned, the students are buying in, they're thriving, and we're seeing the impact. So kudos to the team.
And I would like to thank Liz for her leadership in this area, and Kelly and Desiree for being here tonight, and as representatives of this entire team who are really taking some risks and learning new things, trying new things, and being so supportive of the rest of us who are learning. We appreciate their time and dedication, and we appreciate what it has been able to provide for our students. So thank you.
Jerry, is there a plan for the board to receive just a report on numbers in terms of students at risk as a result of the BIMAS screening at each point? I mean,
if that is a request of the board, we would be happy to provide that.
I just wasn't sure if it was planned by the superintendent or if we needed to request that.
It has not been a report. I don't believe that we've done at a previous board, but the BIMIS is another piece of information. If that would be what the board would like, we can provide that.
Let me take a quick poll then. So Lynn, I see you nodding your head. Tim? Okay. Brenda? I don't see you. Does anybody see Brenda?
Yeah,
That
right
would
in
be
the middle.
fine. That would be fine.
Okay. And Jessica?
Yeah, sounds good.
Jennifer?
Yes, I have a question too. Maybe I missed it. I like the whole restorative practice, especially like in the younger sector of our schools, like the elementary and maybe some middle school and stuff. But when do we cut off like the restorative practices and then dive into the consequences? Like, I understand that reteaching is really great, but sometimes your actions, it requires a consequence. So maybe I missed it, but is there a line that we have, especially like in the high school?
So there isn't necessarily a line, but what we will say is that consequences are part of a discipline process. They're a part of teaching. So just because a restorative process is adopted doesn't mean that there aren't also other types of consequences. So our administrators evaluate those behavior incidents, and they may and very often do administer a disciplinary consequence, such as some kind of privilege restriction, up to and including suspensions. It is the job of our restorative practices specialists, though, to focus on the skills. So what created the situation that resulted in that behavior infraction? What skills or competencies might a student need to work on? And how do you repair the harm that's done to the community? So consequences in restorative practices are not mutually exclusive, but are often done in partnership.
Do we have data like it has I'm sorry, I have like such brain fog. Have our referrals gone down this year as a result in the restorative practice? Is that something we're looking at?
We certainly are looking at trends at this point. It's a little bit difficult because the past 2 years, our data has been so skewed with closure, and then last year having the small classes and shortened schedules and different things like that. So we're trying not to compare much of our data at all to this time last year, but we are certainly taking a dive into the past several years to look at that. That's one of our measures of success.
So we are looking into it. That's great. Thank you.
Are our buildings currently looking at their own data for any trends or cultural goals that they might target for development?
Yes. So buildings look at their own data in a variety of ways, but kind of as it pertains to this work, it's typically through our student support teams. And those are teams of building administrators, school psychologists, school home liaisons, school counselors at the secondary level, our restorative specialist, our SEL interventionist camp, all of that's support staff. And they look at building trends, and that's really how they're identifying what's working and what's not, and also how we group students and assign them to different interventions if they're not meeting those benchmarks. And those are really, those are building level discussions.
I was thinking more beyond, maybe at a lower level than tier 3 intervention. Like I said, tier 1, are there any tier 1 trends perhaps that are studied? You know what I mean? Not looking at mostly just at the at-risk kids, but just for trends in the building.
So our school culture teams that Liz also facilitates, we used to call them PBIS teams, but they encompass so much more than PBIS. So they look at data monthly, and that's really the tier 1 trends. What teaching needs to occur, what celebrations are important to have. And so that's one aspect of looking at that building-wide data. Liz also facilitates the school culture team at the district level. So it's examined at the building level, but also at the district level. And then, of course, each of our buildings has a site-based and leadership team that also examines this data for trends as well.
And do we crosswalk the data from BIMAS with behavior referral data from School Tool or our current tracking system, just to kind of look for parallels?
Yeah, with our new 5 lab that we're using for really up to the minute data analysis and documentation, we are able to look at students who have any at-risk indicators for, and that includes BIMAS scores, their SEL total score, as well as behavior referrals. So we are looking at both of those. It also includes attendance and grades in that as well.
Great, thank you.
I just wondered, there's a lot going on, and I'm wondering, are all of our adults in our building communities understanding of what's going on as we do more with restorative practices and peaceful schools?
I would say that if you asked me that, I'm sorry, I have a bedtime kiddo in the background. I would say that if you asked me that in September, truthfully, the answer would be no. I think that we started a lot of social emotional developmental health realm, but just other initiatives as well. I think there were a lot of moving parts. Now that we're approaching that midpoint, I think that teams have done a really nice job of differentiating roles, communicating that to staff, and the staff are so active, the support staff are so active that they're seeing in real time, teachers are seeing, okay, when Kelly comes into my classroom, this is what happens on a regular basis. The SEL interventionist, these are the reports I'm getting. I know that my student is going to them for intervention. So I'd say from the messaging as well as that real time seeing what's happening, there's a lot more clarity now than in September.
And what I will say from the human resources side of this is that the team did a really nice job of developing role descriptions. You saw some of the components of the role descriptions on the slides this evening where it defines purpose. In that role description are all of the things that each role can do, things that they might be able to do, and things that are not part of their job. So for example, a restorative practices specialist can come in and facilitate a circle, can do a peer mediation, but does not administer disciplinary consequences. So those are defined in each of the descriptions that have been shared.
And I just want to say that I just wonder in how many of our adults are really well versed in understanding. I know it's been shared, but sharing it and having a good understanding is, I hope we're working to that end of good understanding of what the roles are. I sometimes think that we have some gaps.
There's always work to be done, I think, in that department.
Absolutely. And really going back to our objectives of the strategic coherence plan is building staff capacity. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a multi-year process to build staff capacity and understanding. And, we'll use the AID professional development as one example of that. One time professional development isn't going to be enough. So we're offering multiple layers of those opportunities to build capacity on individual components or skills so that eventually we have created more staff members who are well-versed and have expertise and then can help support newer staff members, for example, or staff members who might need an additional boost with the concept. So it is an ongoing process. We are at the very beginning of it with restorative practices, but our objective is to build that capacity.
And one last thing. So if the staff becomes well-versed in it, I would think that their eyes on these kids could also provide a resource to our specialists where they could bring to someone's attention if they're noticing struggles, where they think a specialist might want to take a moment and talk to a particular student or students.
Absolutely. And I know that Kelly and Desiree both have had that experience many times already this year with teachers who either fill out our help form or directly come to one of them and say, this is something that I'm noticing in the classroom. I think they could really benefit from working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a question, if you don't mind. And just take this for what it is. Like I said, I'm having brain fog here. So in the high schools, I have a high schooler and I listen to their friends talking and stuff like that. And this is just coming from them, and who knows if it's true or not. But they're saying that it's taking a lot of time out of their academic day for like the circles and things like that. And they're feeling very stressed because they're not able to use that time to make up work or get help with teachers. So how much time is this actually taking throughout the school day, the school week?
So at the high school level, they have had 2 days, Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe 2 days that have been modified in some way because of student voice needs. Really, we needed an opportunity to hold circles and have that opportunity for student voice in terms of kind of interrupted instruction. And not that classes didn't happen necessarily, but it may have been a modified schedule. So there was an impact on those 2 days that led up to our reset at GRB because of the needs at the time. Other than that, teachers may choose to facilitate a circle during a class, during an academic class. Often it's just a check-in at the beginning of class to kind of get a read, get a pulse, or they actually make it part of their instruction, part of their academic content, which is wonderful to see as well. And kind of the more social emotional learning component, that only happens, that kind of tier 1 instruction only happens during their guided bell. So it's a time that's devoted to this work. So they're not missing instruction from a different content. This is the content. It is their SEL tier 1 time.
So the guided, is it a guided study hall? Is it a guided, or is it just like how much time is devoted toward, is it just for the SEL, like your circles and your instruction for SEL only? Or is it, or was it in the past, like for a study hall where you could get help from other teachers?
So throughout the week, there are certain days that are devoted to, so Mondays are check-in days, announcements, planning, and goal setting. And then there are 2 SEL days and 2 academic days where they can go to different, based on their needs. It really isn't a study hall. There are plans for each of those days. So it's much more structured than the guided study hall model that existed several years back.
So 2 days are for SEL instruction and training only for a week?
Yes, it's the tier 1 curriculum for SEL.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question. Go ahead, Tim.
What percentage of the student body needs this?
My answer, and I think it's Liz's answer too, is 100%.
Oh.
So if you look at the social emotional learning competencies that students need in order to be successful post high school in career, all students need some exposure and practice at development of those skills. So if I'm going to do a job interview, how do I present myself? How do I, clearly articulate what my goals and achievements are? If I'm going to apply to college, if I'm going to be part of a team or a competition, how do I best represent myself? If I'm going to be in a relationship with another human being, how do I resolve conflict in a way that's healthy? So those are all skills that we believe 100% of our students need. How many students need more intensive levels of support beyond that tier 1 instruction? That really varies based on the skill or the even time period that we're talking about. So every student needs the base tier 1 instruction, just like all students need good solid reading instruction. The more intensive levels of support are really dependent on those individual student needs.
Thank you.
Is the tier 1 taught at the younger levels though, and not at the high school level?
So tier 1 is tier 1 SEL instruction is pre-K through 12. we utilize a kind of a packaged, it's Second Step. It's a wonderful program, really working towards those competencies in pre-K through 8th grade. Second Step does not currently exist for high school, although I have heard that that's in the works. And that's really where our SEL Success Coach, Tammy Sheldon, she's been doing a lot of great work in developing that curriculum, the curricular resources for the Tier 1 instruction at the high school level. So it's still working to meet those competencies, to gain those skills, but it is developed in-house at this point.
So if you look at the New York State social emotional learning benchmarks, they're tiered by developmental level. So at the high school, we really focus on the commencement level benchmarks, which are similar goals, but different developmental skills that are expected at 9th and 10th grade, and then at 11th and 12th grade. So that's really the basis of the curriculum. Pre-K through 12 is looking at those New York State social emotional learning benchmarks and the particular skills and competencies that students should be able to master at each developmental level. And that's where the Tier 1 focus is.
So can anyone speak to, and I know that there has been planning, the professional development for our staff at each level on restorative practice? I know when we did tours this past summer that there were settings for the superintendent's day initially for staff to participate in some of the buildings. I don't think I made it to all of the buildings, but I'm just wondering if that was a district-wide effort, and how have we planned to continue to support staff for the implementation of restorative practice and to create classroom environments where restorative circles can happen genuinely, because kids know when something is not real, and if we're all not comfortable and on the same page. I'm just wondering what are our efforts to have all staff comfortable and on the same page there?
So it's our objective to make sure that we provide a Tier 1 professional development opportunity for all staff, similar to the way that we rolled out trauma-sensitive practices. We started with study groups, we built staff capacity, we modeled the practices, we shared miniature professional development snippets. We attended faculty meetings and did presentations. We talked to leadership teams. The rollout will be similar for restorative practices. We did begin our school year with circle facilitation, and Liz can talk particularly about that. And that did occur across every school building. Liz also facilitated a study group a couple of years ago, which was our plan, our 3-year plan to roll out restorative practices similar to the way we handled the trauma-sensitive practice professional development, was to begin with that study group 2 years ago. Obviously, we got interrupted with COVID, but we need to get that back on track. And Liz, you can talk a little bit more about what's coming down the line for staff members.
Yeah, so we've really taken an approach with this over the past several years at this point, starting with our, I call them the believers, right? Like those who are really just genuinely interested. We're not asking them that, we're not saying they must attend, but we just had some opportunities over the summer. Jerry mentioned the study group. We had some PLCs at the elementary level. Some groups, grade level groups, ask me to come, teach them and give presentations. So we have a nice core group. And then over time, we've offered more opportunities. And I will say, having the restorative specialists in the building, one of the functions of their role is not just for that direct student contact, but it is the capacity building for staff. So as they're learning, as staff continue to learn foundations through training, the restorative specialists are there modeling, they're coaching, they're providing training as well. And I see Desiree has a raised hand, so maybe she has a good example.
Yes. So I was going to say part of that during our professional development days that we've done with the paraprofessional aides, we've actually held circles with them. But then also when I lead a circle, every single class that I'm in, it's my expectation, and then they know this, that the other adults also participate in the circle. So the classroom teachers, all of the paraprofessionals, all of the adults, were all just as equal participants in the circles. It's really valuable and meaningful for students to also see, our willingness to participate and answer the same questions that we're asking of them, to see how we can be thoughtful about our own thinking and ourselves. And I think that having the teachers and teaching assistants and aides actually involved in those circles helps their comfort, level of comfort with, sort of engaging students in those ways and on those types of topics. I've had lots of aides, excuse me, come up to me and really say thank you for, helping them to navigate how to speak with students about these type of topics. So I think it's really meaningful.
Excuse me, could someone explain what circles means for the public? I'm not quite sure they would understand what you're talking about.
Yes. So in some of these pictures that are still up, if everybody can still see that slide like I do. So it is an actual circle. We set up in a circle in a classroom, and we really work through some key social emotional learning topics. So in the examples that are on there, I'll just use those. Those circles were surrounding the content of forgiveness. Building those relationships, hopefully choosing people that meet, that have qualities that are of importance to you, trustworthiness, honesty. And then if something does happen, a mistake does happen, and a relationship is damaged or hurt, working through with that person so that you can achieve forgiveness. So we have topics, rounds of questions, and each person in the circle, if they so choose and if they feel comfortable, is able to respond to the prompts, share their own thoughts and experiences. We do have expectations in the circle that everyone upholds, that, if someone is uncomfortable answering, they're able to pass. We give everyone a second chance to respond if they've thought of something they want to share. But so it is an actual circle, and it's designed to give every person a voice and the opportunity for everyone else to hear what they have to say. Does that help with that?
So going back to the capacity building piece, and thank you, Desiree, that's a great example. 4 years ago, we started with a factor of 1. Liz was our sole restorative practice trainer. She was part of a statewide initiative and was invited to participate in statewide training with a representative from City BOCES for our region. So Liz came back, I think it was about 4 years ago, and said, here's kind of an implementation idea. Here's how it ties into the trauma sensitive practices. Here's how it supports positive behavior interventions. Here's how it emphasizes the New York State social emotional learning benchmarks. And here's how it ties into community school. So she really was able to go and get some great training and come back and talk to us about how this approach fits into so many of the priorities that we have established for social emotional learning and culture building within our school community. And from there, now she has this team. Now there's 5 additional people in our district who've had this training and expertise and are then continuing to train and build capacity exponentially. And that's really how we hope this will take root and grow.
Jerry, is there a point at which we survey staff to see what their needs are as this work rolls out and we continue to build capacity? How are we gauging what staff need to facilitate the effort?
We are getting feedback for each of the offerings that we provide, but also our professional development committee, we will look to them and their representation to solicit some suggestions and ideas for what the next steps are as far as being part of our professional development plan.
Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ms. Geithner and Ms. Tiffany and Ms. Saladin and Ms. Luca. Thank you so much this evening. Great presentation. And what I'm finding is in our discussions around the coherence plan, we're having some really great discussion. And I think what those discussions do is it allows people just to hear the discussion that are watching this evening and really to hear what's going on in our district. There are a lot of things going on which are really innovative and cutting edge. And, at one point, I think we shared that, other districts have been calling about, one of our initiatives, the Peaceful Schools, for example. And part of you says it's great to share. At the same time, I want to make sure all our ducks are in order here, with that. And we feel very good. I mean, Peaceful Schools, actually, we grew it larger after school started with the feedback that we had. We actually expanded it based on that initial feedback and literally the home runs the feedback that we were getting. So that's a great example. And in each of the areas that were highlighted this evening, they're growing, evolving, and there's great things happening. And it's a process and it takes time. So thank you for the team and keeping the rudder deep on this work. And really, it will make a difference, not only here in the short term, but the long term. So I'm pleased to hear that. So thank you, and great discussion to the board this evening. So thank you, everybody. Next on the agenda was just an update with respect to the budget and the budget runs. So I want to just hit those. One of the good news that came out and some of the key elements were that districts would receive half of the difference between their 21-22 foundation aid and what they were going to get in 23-24. So we ended last year at 91% of our foundation aid. So this year we came in right around 5%. We're right around 90%. We came in at 5.47%. If we take out the community set aside. So this year we received $2,001,000, 597. As part of that, there are $463,000. It's called community set aside. And Jerry, I'd like you to join me in this conversation because this really falls in yours and Liz's domains. But so that's in there every year. Interestingly, in the run this year, we actually called to check because it's the first year that I went back to 16, 17. Community set aside was always a reminder. So it may say that you got $1 million, but it would say 463,215 is allocated for community set aside. In this year's run, it did not indicate that. So we made some calls. I reached out to our district superintendent, and that fact is true because we were concerned, is that either not there or is it still embedded? And by statute, it is still there. So Jerry, could you talk a little bit about what we do with community set aside? Because I know that's a question that board members and community members may have.
So this is the community school set aside funds, and it really focuses and supports some very specific actions to build community school within the Fulton City School District. So that includes our after school, community school after school program, our community school summer program, as well as supporting many of the community partnerships that we have, such as our Farnham Family Services, our Runaway and Homeless Youth Services, and other collaborations that we have with community partners. It helps support some parent and community involvement initiatives, such as Parent University, and other services and supports designed to make our schools, going back to our vision, that centerpiece of our community, where we are providing access to services that are needed by our students and families, and doing so without duplication of services from community partners. So one of the things that has been very effective in supporting how we use those funds is our Community School Advisory Council, which has existed since community school used to be a competitive grant that we applied for and received. And when the competitive grant program went away, that's when this foundation aid set aside designation was added. And that advisory council really is a clearinghouse, and Liz facilitates that now. It's a clearinghouse where our community partners can come together and say, hey, I just received grant funding for this particular initiative. The target audience for this initiative is families with children ages 7 to 10. And so we connect that community partner with the families of students ages 7 to 10. So it's not just a place, it's not just one program. It's really a way to maximize the impact of community services, both within the school setting and those that are available outside of school, in a way that makes sense and meets the needs of the students and families.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that? It's something we've had for years. This is not new. And if you think about presentations over the years, we've highlighted different aspects. We've never really said, that it came in community set aside. So it really has driven a great deal of work and laid a great foundation here in the district over the years, and where we've built on a lot of the way we've utilized the federal funds, which are one-time monies. So that American Rescue Plan, CRRSA, and the CARES Act monies, those are one-time monies. So we've got the foundations that we've laid with the community set aside. For example, a lot of the work you heard this evening expanded on a lot of those different things, initiatives that we already had in place within our general fund, and then we've bolstered. And one of the questions that came up at the last meeting is sustainability and capacity. So one of the things that we're also doing, and there were some great questions this evening around monitoring of outcomes and impacts on kids. Those are the kinds of things where in every meeting that we're in now, we're saying, all right, what were the impacts? And we're really trying to measure that, progress monitor, so that when we build this budget, are there things that need to slide into this year's budget, into the general fund, that we really want to start getting there now? Things that we need to project into next year's, because those federal funds begin to dry up. Those one-time monies start to dry up. The other thing that I want to remind, as I'm just talking about this briefly this evening, is, $1.5 million, $1.538 million, including the set aside, the other 463, $2 million. Our annual movement, just doing business, generally is about a 3% increase of cost of living, doing business, things like that. Take our budget of $76 million and do the simple math, 3 times 760,000, you're coming in right around 2.2 million. So when you look at $1.6 million in new money, if you will, coupled with the set aside, and you look at that, it's great news. Normally we're looking at 500,000-600,000 at this point in time on those first runs. This year we're looking at 1.6, which is a terrific move. I'm not seeing more dollars coming in the next round like we've done in the past. So we just need to take a good look. We need to look at and be strategic about how we're utilizing our federal funds, and also really being strategic. We're doing well with our reserves and our fund balance. So we need to watch those closely, but that's your savings. So we need to keep those not over the coffers, but we need to keep them close, because you never know what's coming down the pike. So that's a piece there. So I think it's something we need to keep in mind. So I'm optimistic, but also looking at making sure that we're maximizing all of the dollars and being fiscally responsible each year. So I think that's a big piece. The other piece that I wanted to point out, and we'll have a little bit of discussion in a few minutes, is that the different aids, the 11 aids, were left in separate aid lines. That's what school districts wanted to have. So that's a good positive. If they had been combined, that could have impacted us significantly. So the aids are still separate. So it was great to see that. The other piece that I wanted to bring up in the legislation aspect of the budget runs is that the building aid and transportation aid forgiveness is in there. So this will take care of, as you know, and we've had an issue around a piece of paper that wasn't filed absolutely correctly a number of years ago. And the transportation aid forgiveness, for the first time in 4 years anyway, that's always gone in by the Senate and the Assembly. And in the end, it's always been taken out by the governor. This governor has placed it into the budget by her office. That's a first. So I'm hoping that once and for all, this transportation aid issue that's been facing the Fulton City School District will be once and for all addressed. So I was pleased to see that as well in there. And I wanted to comment on that as well. So the overall outlook, they're saying that, these budgets that we look good through 25, 26, 26, 27. That's great to see on the state level. One of the things that I hope is we can anticipate revenues this year, next year, and possibly the year after pretty clearly. We can start to do some forecasting to really get a feel for projecting out, which will help us with our sustainability and capacity. I also want to remind the board that we have a couple of contracts that are coming up for renegotiation as well. And that also is being taken into consideration. We talked about that a bit at the budget workshop, which is also public meeting last week. And, for the people in the community, you can also reference that because it was, I believe, videoed, live streamed. So with that, are any questions around the budget?
Brian, the only question I have is, as we go forward, one of the things I keep reading about that other districts are concerned with is the fact that the formula, the foundation aid formula, hasn't been adjusted in a number of years. And there's a question as to whether or not the current formula supports today's cost for a quality education per student.
Yep.
And so as we go forward, if there's gaps that we're seeing, if you could make sure that myself and others understand what they are so that we can speak intelligently to that. I really don't know until you start going through the numbers and can say one way or the other, whether if the story is true for us also.
Yeah, and Small Cities story, as you know, is very unique, and we work very closely with the Small City School Districts Association. We're very active in that. We serve on their board, and we're very active. And that group actually has just recently won a decision, the Maisto decision, that was 8 districts who fought for, I believe, 13 years.
Right.
Fought for equitable funding for small city school districts, and they actually won that case this past summer after all that time. And that may impact the formula and hopefully impact all of the small city school districts, which would include us as well. It is interesting when you look at all the aid runs across the state. I always, some people think that's not fun. I enjoy it. I like to look to see what's going on across the state, to see different trends. And it's interesting. There's questions about that formula in my mind around equity. And distribution of resources still, just when you look at things. And I don't know everybody's stories, but it is interesting. I looked at 18 different counties, and Oswego came in at one of the lowest rates of increase of any counties of the 18 that I reviewed. Now, there are, I believe, 62, 63 counties in New York State. I only did 18 of them. But what was interesting, I did all the ones that touched us as well as a few around the state. And what was interesting is that's where we fell. And
rural schools also weighed in. I read their material, and they've weighed in that they feel that rural schools have been left behind on the amount of the distribution, as far as distribution of aid. So again, I'm concerned about whether or not, when it's all said and done, how well we really made out. I think the story will tell itself as you work through the budget, and you can help us understand. But I do have some concerns, because it seems like other districts noted what you noted. It's the more affluent districts seem to have received a bigger share, which is what we've been trying to get rectified for decades.
Yeah.
Looking for equity for our kids.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ms. Gray. I think there's a lot of components there. We'll continue to monitor the statute. And I know that it came up in some of the budget hearings, which are starting, I believe, this week. Actually, I think rural schools is up tomorrow. I believe it's 26th, right? And so one of the things that I know is coming up is that the formula requires that it's reviewed every 3 years.
Right.
And so, that's something that I know came up in the meeting with Senator Mayer with small cities.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, obviously we continue to bring things to the table. The debt service, debt limit for small cities is not the same as all other districts in the state, which are 10%. Small cities are 5%. It affects why we have these small capital projects, whereas some other districts are getting $60, $80 million capital projects, things like that. It affects us in a lot of different ways. And I think we need to continue. The big thing is we need to continue to demonstrate how we're utilizing every penny, every nickel in our district, which I think we're good. And I think the way we're approaching the budget process, talking about all of the work connected to the strategic coherence plan, you start seeing in the conversations, it expands out to other things that are going on. You can see how things are starting to be very connected. And I think that will allow us to share our story, so that when that we can share with the powers that be when we're during budget seasons and talking with state officials, that we can tell our story accurately. And then we can start, that what we demonstrate is, look what we can do with what we have. Look what we could do if we were fully acknowledged and funded.
Yes. And again, just for the record, you basically do zero-based budgeting. You bring to us what it will cost to provide the opportunities and services to the numbers of students that require said opportunities and or services.
Yep. Yeah, each year we take a good solid look. We look at all the positions. We looked at every resource. Every year we take a good solid look. We tend to run pretty lean in this district, as we always have. And it's not surprising. Small cities and rural, they tend to do that, more. We have to. It's always been a cost of business. And here in Fulton, I think it's something that one of the things before I got here and while I've been here, I think it's been a very important part here, is we've always been fiscally responsible, really working at that and trying to be as frugal, but as also as impactful. And when you hear that we have 2 early college high schools, no other school districts in this county have 1. We offer, a lot of other different types of programs. I could go on drone certifications. We're really kicking up our opportunities in the areas of tech, not only technology, but we're also working on rooms and spaces. I think we need to do a walkthrough pretty soon, the rooms, what's happening over at the high school and the opportunities that kids are going to have for hands-on opportunities. I'll let Dr. Lisi and Mrs. Parkhurst at a future meeting shine on that one. But we talked about it last summer. It's actually happening and evolving. Each time I walk over there, there's more components in there. So there's a lot of great things going on in our district right now.
And Brian,
yes.
as I talked to you the other day, I would like to see if we could live stream our budget process for our city. Anybody in the city can watch it and get an inkling on some of the processes.
Yep. So what Ms. Lyons is bringing up, I received a request. So like for example, last week, our budget workshop was live streamed. Tonight, obviously, every board meeting, there'll be a strong component of budget as part of that. In a future board meeting, I'm not sure if it's the next one or the one right after, we'll be doing the roll forward, and that'll really get us rolling. Budget committee is next Tuesday, and the budget committee meets, I believe, at 6 p.m. And I will let you know the members. I know we've got Zach Mentor, Spencer Horton, who's a parent, Carolyn Chatterton, from our library down here at Fulton Library. Lynn Lyons is on there, Jess Pepilardo, Nick DiGiolorem, Fallon Cooper, Carrie Phillips, teacher and part of our one of our leaders in our Teachers Association. Donna Parkhurst and Liz Stoddard have all wanted to participate. That'll be a part. The other piece, and Dr. Lisi and I need to talk a little bit about it. We're also looking at different ways to collect information and dialogue. So Let's Talk is something that we're looking at. Hopefully, we've had a couple meetings on that, and that's an opportunity for dialogue on certain topics. We're getting information in and out. It's really trying to find ways to gathering and reciprocate information back and forth. So I believe we will, Ms. Lyons, there's no reason not to. It's a Google Meet, so we'll be able to live stream our meeting next Tuesday for our building committee. Listen to me, our budget committee as well.
Brian, can you clarify the role of the budget committee?
So the role of the budget committee is advisory. It's sharing all of the information that's coming in, bouncing things back and forth, gathering feedback, asking questions, they're really representatives from the community, opportunities for them to bring information back from meetings. So it's advisory in nature to the superintendent, and it's an opportunity for us. Say there's questions that are coming up that we're hearing, we can bring them up, discuss them at that committee, get feedback, all of those kinds of things. And we really resurrected it last year because we thought originally we were hearing 20% reductions. So we resurrected it. It had been done previous to me coming here. I believe I did it once when I came, and then really it was a great idea. It's an opportunity, just another opportunity, collect feedback and create opportunities for those individuals to go into the community, educate, but also bring back information, or bring back questions that may be happening out in the community. So it really provides a number of opportunities for us.
I think perhaps if it is provided virtually, it might be more effective. And I think that maybe help. I'm curious to see how that will work.
Me too. It's a great idea. Thank you, Ms. Lyons and Mr. Cordone, for backing that up. So thank you. So I've shared the committee members. I'm looking at my committee, and then also our monthly financial report. Dr. Lisi, can you please share that as well, and then we can close this aspect of the board meeting.
Can do. Thank you very much, Mr. Baldino. Good evening, everyone. That conversation serves as a perfect introduction to the general financial summary for the month, particularly in terms of accountability. So let me just start first with, this is our period ending December 31st, and we'll start with our local and state revenues. Those are in line with prior year-to-date figures. And you'll probably notice that there's a slight difference in our federal income, and that's just simply our first portion of our federal COVID stimulus funds that you're seeing in our current year to date that have been added to that revenue stream. So the 344% increase is really our COVID funds that we've received recently. In line with that, our expenditures, again, in line with last year's year-to-date expenditures. And again, you'll see the same sort of anomalies in our in two areas, the equipment and supply lines. And again, those are in anticipation of our COVID stimulus funds. Other than that, we're in line with our budget, and I'll defer to Ms. Nichols if we have anything else that you'd like to add. And I'll pause just like Brian. I've learned well. So thank you very much. And that'll be it for the budget summary.
I believe that's the conclusion. Let me just make sure. There's a page change right here. Just 1 second. And that's it. So that's the conclusion of the superintendent's report. There was a lot of information this evening. And I hope it's helpful as we move forward with a lot of decision making over the next 4 to 6 months. So thank you.
Thank you. Item 4.01, approve extra classroom activity fund corrective action plan.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry-Amy, yes.
Mr. Cordone? Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore?
Yes.
Mrs. Mainville?
Yes.
And I was a yes, but I think I was muted.
Item 4.02, to accept the financial reports provided.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry-Amy, yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore?
Yes.
And Mrs. Mainville?
Yes.
Item 4.03, approve the single audit report.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry-Amy, yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore?
Yes.
And Mrs. Mainville?
Yes.
Item 4.04, approve transportation contract.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry-Amy, yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mrs. Pappalardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore?
Yes.
And Mrs. Mainville?
Yes.
Item 5.01 is the first reading of policies. Are there any questions or comments related to the list of policies submitted by the policy committee? I personally would like to thank the policy committee. That's a lot of work, and I appreciate the effort that went into this work. Mrs. Perry-Amy, yes.
That's a note, Robin.
Right.
Approval?
I'm a yes that they did a good job. I thank you. Boy, I get going on a roll here. Item 6.01, approve committee on special education.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry-Amy, yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mrs. Pappalardo?
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore?
Yes.
And Mrs. Mainville?
Yes.
Item 6.02, approve lead evaluator.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry-Amy, yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
Item 7.01, approve policy 6730.0.
Move it. Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
Item 7.02, approve the use of piggyback purchasing.
Move it.
Second.
Discussion. Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
Item 7.03, award a turf contract for the capital construction project.
Move it. Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
Item 7.04, to award the Astroturf contract for the capital construction project.
Move
Move
it.
it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Palardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
I wonder if my colleagues are interested in batching items 8.01 through 8.12. They are all personnel items.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion on any of those items? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Papalardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
Dave, I see you first. So how you want to start us off tonight?
Sure. So I want to thank Jerry and everyone who presented an update on SEL. I'm hopeful for a BIMAS presentation eventually to the board. I think there's a lot there, and there's a lot for us to understand, a lot for our parents to understand, and perhaps even staff and students. So I look forward to that. I want to thank some of the questions that Lynn and Tim offered tonight, and as we were working through that presentation, because we often forget, those of us that are close to that information, that not everyone is. So those were excellent. And really importantly, I really want to thank the governor for the transportation aid matter. I know that it's a piece of paper, but yes, we've described it. But it's a piece of paper that can cost this district more than $1 million. Were she not able, or were she not willing, like the former governor, to forgive that paperwork mistake. And so I hope that we'll take formal action when it's appropriate. And I'm really grateful for that for our community, because $1 million, more than $1 million, goes a long way for Fulton. And I also want to thank you, Robin, for your comments to Brian in the discussion regarding the budget, and keeping us informed for where we need to advocate for the district, because we can't lose sight of the fact that this is one budget and we have to look longitudinally. And I hope that, I know that Brian will do that. He's got a lot on his plate, but thank you for keeping that on his radar. That's what I have.
Lynn, I see you next.
Dave said it all. He really, really did. I'm interested to see also how the restorative plan is going to work out. That was very interesting, and I'd like to hear more.
And Tim, now you're right there.
I was going to say, if you saw her, you'd have to see me. I just want to thank our administrative team also for doing an excellent job, and thank everyone for their presentations. And I don't want to thank anybody for the transportation aid thing yet. It's not a done deal. We've waited a lot of years. Let's not get our hopes up. But hopefully it gets done this time. And that's it.
Thank you. Jessica, I see you.
Yeah, I just want to thank our presenters again, and it sounds like they're doing really excellent work. And I think that the SEL portion of our strategic coherent plan is really super important for our K-6 kids, and I'm glad that they feel that they're getting a lot out of it. And I'm glad that Dave asked for some of the survey results, because I think that that's a question that I have every presentation that we watch is, what was the baseline? Because I wasn't here prior to this year, so I don't know a lot of times what the baseline is. We say we want 90% of the kids to feel comfortable and accepted at school, but where were we at when we started this? So I think survey results go a long way, and but everything was very informational, and I appreciate their time in that respect. So
Thanks for the reminder, Jess, that we've got to remember to give you the backup so that you have the backstory. We try, but we don't always. So don't ever hesitate to say, I need the backstory.
Okay.
Brenda, I see you.
I kind of feel like we're on Romper Room. I see you. My colleagues have pretty much said a lot of what I was thinking tonight. I really did enjoy the SEL presentation, and I'm wondering if maybe next meeting when Reagan and Molly are on, they can share their insights on the part of the committee that they participate in on that. So, Brian, if you can remind me to ask them when they're with us next.
I highlighted it in my notes. Got it. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm just really thankful for our administrative team. I'm thanks to Brian for recognizing them this evening. What a wonderful job they do for our district and for our kids. They go above and beyond, and I know it's a tireless job, and I just don't think that we can thank them enough for everything that they've done. So big shout out of thanks to you guys. And that is about it, because my colleagues have touched base on a lot of stuff this evening. So thanks for the good conversations.
Jennifer.
Thank you for everyone who was speaking previous to me. You pretty much summed it all up. I'd also like to just also give a really big shout out to our administrative team, especially for today. I know that it was very trying with the masks and the students and the parents, and so I'm thankful that we got through the day and got through it well, and everybody survived it. I'd also like to give a shout out to, I gotta say her name, Mrs. Cruschetti at the middle school. She is out there, and she's usually by herself. From what I see, maybe someone else is out there, but she's doing a really great job keeping that circle moving at the middle school. And it's really great. And I know it's a thankless job, especially with those middle school kids. We've had to pick up Allison a couple days now, so she's doing a great job. And the circle and the whole way it was like put together, it's definitely working out well. So I'm thankful for that and for her. Thank you.
Thank you. And my own thanks out to the administrators for every day. It is a trying job some days, and I know that there's times you all feel rewarded. You've all expressed that at one time or another, that's why you do the job, because there are rewards when you see kids do well. But again, still thankful for you and for everything that you do. And thanks to Jerry Geithner, Liz Tiffany, and your team of social emotional supporters out in the district doing such an amazing job with our kids and helping their families as they help their children. I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate that you are breaking ground sometimes, doing new things that have never been done before. So thank you for all of that. And everything else has been said by my peers. So with that, I would like to ask someone to move item 9.02 to move to executive session.
Move it.
Second.
Is there any discussion? And we're going to go into executive session momentarily, and we will take care of that portion of work, and then we will return to public session to close the meeting. On behalf of the board, I thank those of you that are watching for taking time out to join us this evening. It is appreciated that you are trying to learn about the district and provide us with feedback from time to time. Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordome,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Pippolardo,
Yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Mainville.
Yes.
And my colleagues, would you like a 5-minute break? 5-minute break, and we'll come back and we'll go into our executive session. See Mr. Wilson. We are back in public session, and at this point in time, I would ask the board to move item 9.03 to adjourn this meeting.
Move it.
Second.
Second.
Third.
Dave, did you second?
I tried.
All right, we'll go with that.
You got that, Brenda? Thank you.
Yes.
All right. So all those in favor, I think I can see everybody. If you can give me a thumbs up. And it's unanimous.
Yep.
And I thank you all, and get some rest. Jen, I hope you feel better.
Me too.
Soon. I'm very sorry that it's kicking your.
Thank you. I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
The rest of you, take care of yourself. Stay healthy. See you soon.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Pray for